3 whistles rang out, and I knew what that meant. I was a lifeguard. I was 19 years old, and 3 whistles on the beach meant someone was missing. I ran to the main stand, and our captain, the captain of our field, shouted the order. Get down to field 3. They lost someone in a rip. It's a search and rescue. 10 of us ran down the beach to join the search team. There was a crowd, and people were pointing to where they last saw the missing swimmer. We dove into the ocean and swam out past the breakers. Our team formed a straight line perpendicular to the shore and started the search pattern. We dove down about 10 feet, swam into the current, and came straight up for air. When everyone popped up, we repeated the process again and again and again. We were exhausted, but we didn't come in. More than an hour later, I heard the whistles again. It was an awful feeling. We weren't done. We didn't find him. We ran back to our field, and Bob led us in a moment of silence. When we opened our eyes, he looked at each of us and said, "No one goes down in our water. At this field, no one goes down on our watch. You either make the save or you die trying." Just a little intense, huh? That was a moment that changed me. And boy, did I take those words to heart. A few years later, I went to law school so I could guard my family. I worked 70 hours a week so I could guard my clients. I was exhausted. I would wake up in the morning and I would feel this sense of dread. But just like at the beach, I didn't come in. I didn't come in because I was afraid if I did, someone would go down. And no one was going down in my water again. All that guarding eventually put me in the emergency room with electrodes taped to my chest. It was a Saturday, and my wife Randy and I were headed to our son's baseball game. All of a sudden, I was sweating. My heart was racing. I couldn't get my breath. I laid on the ER gurney for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, the doctor slid the curtain and walked in. "Mr. Markel, I just want to let you know you did not have a heart attack. You're going to be okay, but you said you haven't been sleeping well and your job sounds extremely stressful. And the coffee, it isn't helping either. Today was just an anxiety attack. Next time you might not be so lucky." A few hours later, I walked out of the hospital on my own 2 pretty shaky legs. And I looked up at the sky and I said, "Thank you." And you know what I felt? I felt like I was given a reprieve. I made a promise to myself that day that I would let my guard down a little. That instead of working myself into a state of exhaustion, that I would come in, I would accept help. But it didn't take long before I fell back on my old habits. And like so many times before, I came home late from work one night. I remember it was cold and rainy, and I walked in the house dripping. I knew I had missed the chance to kiss the kids goodnight again. I walked up to my wife and I said, "If I keep doing what I'm doing, you're going to be a widow." That was a moment of truth for us because of what Randy said and didn't say that night. She didn't remind me of the bills and the responsibilities because she knew I knew. She didn't pacify me either. She took a breath and smiled and said, "We'll figure it out." Because of her, I didn't feel an enormous pressure to do something like quit my job or move to Fiji, although Fiji would have been pretty cool. I didn't have to jump ship from my high-stress life. I didn't have to have a midlife crisis when I had the option to find my midlife calling instead. I knew I needed to make tangible changes. I needed to find a practice that I did every single morning the moment I woke up, so it was how I started the day, and it set the tone for the day, and it was how I spent my day. And so the next morning I woke up, I was laying in bed, And I said, this is the morning. Today's the day. I'm going to meditate. Okay, I'm ready. And I found out pretty quickly that I am a crummy meditator. And I was laughing because I had this thought. I thought about this movie, Jerry Maguire. I couldn't get it out of my head. The character of Jerry's mentor, Dickie Fox. And how he was talking about his philosophy of business and life. And how he loved his wife and he loved his life. And before I knew it, I just shouted the words out loud. I said, I love my life. And it felt pretty good. So I said it again. I love my life. And I had to go in the office that day and deal with some pretty tough stuff. And I still wanted to do my best. But it got to be 6 o'clock. And I said, the work will be here tomorrow. And I went home to kiss Randy and kiss the kids and have dinner and tell them bedtime stories. And I felt better. And I woke up the next morning and I said it again. I love my life. And I thought, maybe there's something to this. Every day after that I woke up, I said those 4 simple words. Over the next 2 years, we created our Plan B, and I reinvented my career path to eventually become the CEO of a large company. I even wrote a book about it, Pivot. Because it was clear that that's what I had done. That's what we had done. We had pivoted. Pivot is a term that means a change in direction. Like how a basketball player can pivot on one foot and turn 360 degrees around to see all the options. The book did well. And I had the privilege to share the reinvention process with people all over the world. So it all worked out perfectly, right? Right? Not so fast. We got a little more time. Before I knew it, I found myself back on guard again. Only now, instead of clients, I had employees and contractors that were depending on me. And the economy was turbulent, and the company wasn't doing well. It was like I could hear those lifeguard whistles all over again. I was searching for a way to save the day, and I was the one going down. I didn't even see it. In perfect timing, my daughter Lindsay asked me out to lunch. And I think, she wants little daddy advice. Just graduated from college. It was the exact opposite. She didn't want to ask my advice. She wanted to give me some. Dad, I'm worried about you. You're doing it again. You're stressed out and exhausted again. We never see you. Something has to change. And I knew instantly that she was right. It was pivot time again. Clearly, I didn't get the message the first time in the hospital because there I was again. Back on guard. Several months after my daughter said, Dad, something has to change, my company decided to make a change that didn't include me. I could feel the current of fear coursing through me. And I learned at the beach that you can't fight the currents. When you do, you get worn out. And that's how people go down. I knew I had to take care of myself and I had to stay calm. So I started going on these long walks. And then I had the bright idea that I should listen to the audible version of Pivot. I thought, geez, if it could help so many other people reinvent, deal with change, maybe it could help me too. Ironic, huh? To read my own advice was surreal enough, but to listen to my voice was agonizing. But then it started to work some crazy magic on me. And before I was even done, I knew I didn't have to go it alone. I called an old buddy of mine, somebody who knew what I was going through, and I told him, I said, I'm ready to do things differently. I got it this time. I know I thought I got it last time, but I got it this time. He just stopped me and he said, Adam, embrace the pivot. I couldn't stop thinking about that. What does it mean to truly embrace something? And he was right. I thought about my own book, that we always have choices when it comes to how we respond to change. We can resist it, we can accept it, we can ignore it, or we can embrace it. The real pivot for me was to practice embracing everything in my life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, including my own fear of the unknown. Within a few months, I formed a new company, More Love Media, and our team started working with individuals and organizations to build work cultures of inspiration and resilience rather than exhaustion. The work was well received, and I was asked to speak at a conference. It was there that I met a man named George. I remember seeing him earlier in the day, fidgeting in his seat. And I thought, this guy's already got one foot out the door. I was curious, so I went up to him at lunch and I asked him a few questions. And George said, truthfully, I don't want to be here. I've been to a few of these touchy-feely seminars before, and with all due respect, they're a waste of my time. I thought back to when I was a lawyer and I go, you know, the term with all due respect didn't really mean that. But I kept listening to this guy share that he'd been through some rough times. Bad economy, 2 divorces, not a lot to love in his life. He didn't say it overtly, but I could feel him telling me that he'd earned the right to be angry and not buy into any of the Kool-Aid, as he called it. I didn't think I could turn George around before the end of lunch. So I thanked him for his valuable feedback. And I left him with one question. George, what if you decided to love your life no matter what? I went back on stage even more inspired to deliver for those business leaders, ideas that they could really use. And a couple of months later, I received an email, and guess who it was from? My mom. George, he said that his life only seemed to get worse after he spoke to me that day. I got to tell you, I almost stopped reading right there, but I'm glad I didn't, because there was a shift. He described hitting a kind of a low point after another relationship fizzled out, and he remembered the question I asked him. What if you decided to love your life no matter what? And he said he made a decision right there and then. In that moment, he decided to take the challenge. And he went on to say that he hadn't felt this good. He couldn't remember when. And he hoped that the Kool-Aid didn't wear off anytime soon. And he thanked me for the words that changed his life. I've had other glimpses of the power of these words. I was in Japan speaking to a group of business leaders. And the next morning, I was enjoying an amazing sushi breakfast. What's better than sushi for breakfast? I got to tell you, nothing. All of a sudden, this man walks up to my table, and he bows, and he says, arigato. And he respectfully hands me his card. I noticed there was a woman standing behind him, and after a few seconds, she moved forward, and her head was down. And when she lifted it, I could see that there were tears coming down her face. She stepped a little closer and stood still. And in broken English, she said, I love my life. Something inside me said that this was the first time she'd ever said those words. The first time she'd ever given herself permission to feel that way about herself. Hers were tears of joy. I remember feeling so great when I got back from Asia. And then it hit me. The little ego voice inside my own head started asking questions. Is this too simplistic? Is this really as tangible and important as the law? Because when I was studying 12 hours a day to take the bar exam, having to learn the Uniform Commercial Code and the federal rules and something you never want to have to learn called torts, I didn't think that someday I'd be known as the I love my life guy. That questioning continued, and it kept me up late one night. I couldn't sleep. So I started looking at some pictures of my college sweetheart, who has blessed me every single day since by being my wife, and our 4 amazing children. And me, when I actually had some hair. And I thought back to all the work and stress and drive. And the words of that ER doctor and my daughter and my good friend. And I realized I didn't have to continue proving myself. I didn't have to guard anything. So I looked at those pictures of our crazy, chaotic, wonderful life. And I realized I was finally coming in. It's like I could hear those 3 rescue whistles again. Only now they were waking me up and reminding me that I truly love my life. Yes, it's as simple as that. It's as transformational as that. It's the difference between living on guard and living on grace. The difference between being guarded and being guided. It was a new language for me, new dialogue with myself. And when we have the words, we also have the way. Those 4 little words have been a buoy for me to embrace every time I've been caught in the riptides of fear, doubt, or worry. You may recognize yourself in someone like George and feel that life has dealt you a bad hand, where the things haven't been fair. Maybe you work for somebody you don't like, in a job you don't like, or where you don't feel appreciated. Maybe you've been caught up in striving and achieving to prove something, like I was. And all I ask is, what if you decided to love your life no matter what? What if you decided tomorrow morning, when you woke up and the alarm went off, and you have to commute, and you're already running behind time and thinking about the chores, what if you decided to take 10 seconds and put your feet on the floor and take a deep breath and feel gratitude and appreciation for yourself? And you said these words, I love my life. I love my life. I love my life. What if you decided right now to love your life? Thank you.